Hi, guys. How are you? Good to be here and excited to be sharing with you. My name is Pauline Mutua. I'm a life coach, seated here with my friend and colleague, Carol, where we shall be taking you through some of the topics we shall be talking about and helping you heal through during an event we shall be holding in September, the story of my life. And this story is really deeply connected to who you really are. And right now, what we're trying to talk about is sex and sexuality. Topics that, wow, change. And we've grown up in an area where we don't discuss. Everyone is always trying to discover it on their own way, make their own mistakes, and learn from it. And I believe that's where we all emerge. Being the man and woman that we are in the world, we all emanated from sex. And if we don't get to talk about it, if we don't get to understand it, we shall continue making messes in our lives as we can observe in the world today. So sex and sexuality. The world revolves around sex and sexuality. Yet it's interesting. No one wants to talk about it. It's all spoken about in harsh voices. As a result, we've created so many errors in the world. As a result, people carry it with a lot of shame. When we talk about sex, it's upheld with a lot of shame. And I believe until we can face it and be proud at what's happening as a result of what happens behind the scenes with sex and be willing to share it in a table, even in a family, nothing will change. We shall continue suffering in the world. I grew up as a girl, and I'm sure, Carol, you did, where that's a topic that you'd be killed if you ever raised that word. I remember there was always this song, Let's Talk About Sex, Baby, and any time that song was heard, oh my God, if your parents were around the table, you wanted to hide.
It was taboo.
I mean, and if you ever pronounced those words, it was the worst thing. And I grew up thinking sex was such a shameful thing. And considering I grew up in a boarding school, a missionary boarding school, where we were taken care of by nuns. We were taught of how sex was a shameful thing. We were taught how the opposite sex was the worst thing that happened to us. And I grew up being afraid of that until in my adulthood, now I get married and here I am. This is somebody who loves me. I'm supposed to love them. I'm supposed to enjoy sex. And yet,
you can't even talk
I
about it.
can't talk about
even
it. Can you imagine what's happening? Our kids end up carrying the stigma when it comes to sex. Sexuality is basically who we are as a man and woman. We are living in a world where women and men are trying to fight to be equal, and we've forgotten it is the two of us who, when we come together from a place of healing, the feminine and the masculine together, then we shall be able to come and create a creation that's built out of love. Maybe you can share a bit more about it, Carol.
I mean, when you talk about sexuality as, you know, the feminine and masculine element of humanity, it's just about, you know, femininity is the element of receiving, you know, receiving, nurturing, and all that. Masculinity is the element of giving, you know, going, creating and all that. So now without each other, the world cannot function. And so because I have my feminine and masculine side, I need to embrace both for what they are, so that I can allow the other person to also embrace both. So what we are doing with all this female emancipation, it's, I am not allowed to be myself. I'm not supposed to embrace my masculinity, and so I cannot allow my husband to embrace that, his masculinity. And so it's just about all of us embracing who we are and standing where we are supposed to stand, so that we can allow the other person to stand where they're supposed to stand. And when it comes to sex, it's funny because even when we started our periods, I remember my mom sat me down and she told me, now you're a grown woman, you don't play with boys. There was no word about sex. There was nothing about what could happen. I'm like, okay, so out in the field, do I not play with them? And you know, there's this strange thing about sex that we've carried in even into our marriages. And we are not completely healed yet, because even I find it a bit to talk about sex with my husband. Yes, we do it.
Yes.
And we can do it even every day. But sitting down and saying,
discuss it.
let's talk about sex, baby, it's totally out of, the norm. And so we want to change that, because if only we could heal, we could have better lives. We could even be able to talk about it with our children, because how can you be able to talk about it with your child and you're not able to talk about it with the one who you're having it with?
Yes.
And now it has been reduced to a transaction. It is nipe, And so when you're not giving, you feel like someone is suffering, and it's so transactional that it removes the fun out of it.
Yes.
And so we are not even free to just be ourselves. And that's where we should actually be ourselves, because the more you enjoy sex, the more creative you are.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And you actually look around us. The world is as a result of the creation that's around us.
Yes.
And we need to embrace that in the femininity and masculinity that a husband and a wife brings into a home, and be able to freely talk about it, discuss about it with pride, and even sit down and share with our kids, because we want our kids to grow up with pride, because anything that is connoted around sex has been put a lot of negative in the world. You can see people are sleeping around and nobody wants to talk about it. Why is it that people have to go behind the scenes and not talk about it? Because of the shame that it has been put. So when we are working with you in the story of my life, is to allow you embrace and not look at anything to do with sex and sexuality from a place of shame. Embrace that as the beauty that it brings to who you are today. You are created as a result of the beautiful sacred union that sex was. And here you are. And the world is today as a result of that sacred union in that thing called sex. So we shall be able to talk about more of sex and sexuality and help us proudly discuss it from a place of the sacredness it brings in any union in this life. Join us in the Story of My Life event that's coming up in September. We shall gladly walk with you in this journey, where you live with a smile when it comes to anything to deal with sex and sexuality. Love and light.
The Story of My Life is an event that will help you back to wholeness and healing. It will turn you into the you that you are and connect you to your destiny.